Great. Well, it looks like we've got most everyone in, so we're going to go ahead and kick this off. I want to thank all of you again for taking your time this morning to join us on this second part of a three-part series in looking at Microsoft Teams. Specifically, we're going to be looking today at administering and managing Microsoft Teams. Just as a quick housekeeping note, if you do have a question, we would definitely ask that you ask that in the Q&A section. You'll see it right at the bottom right there. What we're going to try and do throughout this time actually is if you have a question and you want to ask it and post it in there, we're going to try and answer that throughout the course of the webinar here. If we're not able to answer it, we might try and save it for the end. We're going to have a few questions at the end for Q&A. And if we're not able to answer it even then what we're most likely going to have to do is have someone from CCB, or even specifically if you have a rep with CCB, reach out to you. So with that, let's move on to the next slide here. Awesome. Thank you. So just by way of quick introduction for myself and then also for CCB. So my name is Logan McCoy. I'm the Vice President of Services with CCB Technology. I've been with the organization for about 13 years, and I've specifically been on the services side for about the last 5 or 6, overseeing both our professional services team as well as our managed services team. And then who's going to be doing the bulk of the demo and presentation today is Jacob Tarowski, or Turbo as he's affectionately known here in the office, and he is our Director of Enterprise Architecture. Jacob's been with the organization for around 6 years, started as a system engineer, moved up to Director of Services, and now, as I just mentioned a moment ago, is our Director of Enterprise Architecture. And just a little bit about CCB as well, because I'm sure a number of you on this are already working with us or have familiarity with who we are. But for those of you, if this is your first time ever hearing about CCB, I want to give you just a really quick backdrop. So we've been in business for 29 years. We have specifically focused early on in those 29 years working with nonprofit organizations. And a lot of that was centered around us working to try and help them procure the software and hardware that they needed at a heavily discounted rate through varying Microsoft, Dell, Adobe type programs. Around 10 years or so ago, we made a major shift to really starting to serve our organizations that we worked with. And at that point, too, there was a major shift in not just working with nonprofits, but also working with corporate accounts. And so about 10, 11 years ago, we made that shift to offering a number of services from the professional side as well as the managed side. And one of the early ones that we still do a lot of is around Office 365, which is a component of what we're going to be talking about today, as Teams is really the main focus. Something that I always like to highlight for us is we've worked with organizations across the nation. I think it's been over 40,000 at this point, from Alaska and California to Maine, kind of anywhere in between, right? And all the services listed on the screen there that you can see that we do, but is the awards that you see on the bottom right there. So for the last 4 or 5 years, we have been rated across the nation as one of the Tech Elite 250. That includes VARs, MSPs, kind of the whole gamut. But then also from an MSP perspective, we've been rated within the top 150 across the nation, which for us, I think speaks a lot to our ability to grow and grow well over these last few years, as we've only been doing that for around 10 years or so. So with that, actually starting to jump into what is Microsoft Teams. And if you've been on the last session here, this is going to be a little bit of a repeat for you. But for those of you, again, if this is your first time on, I want you to have a good foundation of what is Teams, right? So Microsoft Teams essentially is the marrying of 2 applications that Microsoft has had out for quite a long time. One of those being Skype for Business, or used to be called Link, and the other one being called Sharepoint, right? So Skype, if you've ever used it, it's really a communication platform. So it can be used as a full video VoIP type solution. It's got chat, IM, presence, all of that kind of stuff, video conferencing built into it. So it's really that key communication application that a number of organizations have used, ourselves internally as well, for years. Now, on the flip side of that, you have SharePoint, which is really a document repository and a collaboration tool. So really at its base level, it's able to store those files and documents, Word, Excel, PDF, JPEGs, all that kind of stuff. But where it really comes to life is allowing you as a user to be able to collaborate with people in your organization, within your team at the same time. And so something that if you've ever been on our 365 demos in the past, I'm sure we've done for you is shown you what that collaboration experience looks like. And so again, basically what Microsoft has done is they've taken that communication component of Skype and that collaboration and file repository of SharePoint and married that into what is Microsoft Teams to give a unified communication and collaboration experience. That's essentially, in a nutshell, what Microsoft Teams is. So with that, now I'd like to turn it over to Jacob Tarowski, who's going to go a little bit deeper into Teams and then also actually go through a demo of a few key components of administering and managing Teams. So with that, Jacob, take it away.
Good morning, everyone. So a couple things. So Logan talked about Teams, and so obviously a key piece of that is the actual team component of Microsoft Teams. So they didn't make that confusing for any of us at all. But so what is a team, right? So if you've seen any of the previous webinars, you kind of have a general idea, but in its simplest form, a team is a place to collaborate. We can have all sorts of information, files, conversations, meetings, notes, all sorts of things within a team. We'll talk about that in a little bit here, but basically, it's just a place to collaborate. But from an administrative standpoint, and for myself, as we go to take care of these things and keep them running and set them up from an IT administrative side, my question really is, what is a team, right? There's a lot that's happening here. And so on the back end, we have a lot happening to actually create the experience that everybody sees when they launch the Microsoft Teams application. So the core of it is that we have an Office 365, or if you've seen anything in the news lately, Microsoft is rebranding and renaming that to Microsoft 365. So we have a Microsoft 365 group on the back end that helps drive membership. It helps drive a bunch of the other components that hook into there. We have a SharePoint site, so we have the ability to share documents and files. We have the ability to check things out, take advantage of all the versioning control and things like that of SharePoint. We have a shared mailbox and a calendar, so there's some Exchange integrations here. So we can send emails to a team, to a group that will distribute out to everybody. We have a calendar to schedule events, so there's Exchange Online components to it. There's a OneNote that gets provisioned for each team to take notes and take full advantage of all of the other features that are inside of OneNote. And there are a few other applications as well, such as Planner and Power BI on the back end for running some analytics. So that's all on the back end of a Microsoft team. And then on the front end, we have the Teams interface itself, right? Whether you're using the full client or in a browser. And Microsoft has done a great job of making those two experiences pretty much the same, whether you're in a browser or you're in the full client. And those are where we have all of our chats, our channels inside of the Teams, video calls, the other third-party apps that you plug into there. So within that, there's a lot happening inside of a team, right? So when you go into the application, you hit Create Team, all of this stuff is getting built on the back end. And so as an administrator, there's a lot there that I want to be able to control. And so we talk about this all the time when we work with clients, but the sprawl is real. If you just let that go unchecked, it multiplies very, very quickly. There are all of those other components that get built every time someone creates a team. And so if we're not working through the aspect for us of saying, hey, this should be a channel instead of a team, right? A channel, just a way to organize that information instead of creating a brand new team that comes with all of those things we just mentioned. Or if we talk through and people just say, oh, like I was trying to test this and I created a team here and I created a team over there, and marketing and sales were trying something and they created another team. And so if you have things that are doing backup within your Office 365 tenant, you're creating additional SharePoint sites with every one of those teams. If you're having files and things in there, you're adding data into that on the back end. If you're sharing things back and forth with one another, there's all that additional content that starts getting backed up potentially, depending on how your backup solution looks like. So there might be a process there of increasing your backup footprint, which might increase the amount of data and the amount of time it takes for you to do your backups and things like that. So there's all sorts of pieces that happen there that it's really important for us as administrators to make sure that we can control that and lock that down so that we don't have to deal with this kind of just uncontrolled chaotic growth. And so we'll dive into that here. And so what does that look like for us? So we'll start with a couple things. And so the concept of those 365 groups are really what drive that key component of a team. So the heart of what's happening there and links all that stuff together is a group. And so those are used to create all different parts of your 365 tenant. You create the teams, it's part of Planner, it's part of all of those other applications on the back end. And so one simple thing that we can do is lock down who is able to create groups within your tenant. And so we'll jump in here on the admin side and look at a couple things. And so one of the things that we can do is create a group here in Office 365 called Allow Group Creation, or following some sort of naming convention that you have so you understand what this is for. And what we're doing here is that we're placing people, users that we want to have the ability to create groups and therefore create teams into this group. And so there are a couple of key pieces in there of roles that are always able to create groups. So if you're familiar with your active users inside of Office 365, if we come in here and pick a user, after the screen loads for me, we can look at different roles such as a global administrator, Exchange admins, SharePoint admins, those sort of things. So there are certain roles within Office 365 that no matter how we work with these people, they will be able to create a group no matter what. They'll be able to create a team on the back end of Office 365 within the Admin Center. So if we come in here, so you'll see here, so we have Exchange admin, global admin, SharePoint admin, team service admin. So some of these groups will have ways to create groups from the administrative side. So no matter what we add for users into that group that we're looking at here, certain pieces here will have the ability to do that. So an Exchange admin has access to the Exchange Admin Console to work with all of your transport rules, to work with all of your mail flow components and things like that. And groups are obviously a part of that. They help drive distribution groups and things that we're used to from a mail flow perspective. And so they'll have the ability from that back end perspective to create those groups. A team service admin will also have that ability. They'll be able to access the Teams Administrative Center and be able to work with groups and things within inside of there. So there are certain roles within 365 that will always have that capability. What we're looking at is the ability to lock down what someone sees within the Teams application itself. And so you'll notice here I have a number of browser windows open. I'm using the browser version so that I can be signed in as a couple different users to display some things for us. But as an example here, if we take a look at our teams, we come down here and we talk about joining or creating a team. So this is my administrator account, and I'm able to create a team here. You can see this tile here. I can click create a team, and I can then walk through the wizard and go ahead and add a team into our environment. And that will add all those components we talked about. It'll link a SharePoint backend, it'll create all the Exchange components, and then create the team, and then we can go ahead and work with it from there. If I jump over to another person here who has, she's in that group that we were looking at before for allow group creation, you can see within here that if I click on hers, she also sees this tile. And so I can go ahead and, as this user, not the administrator, I can go ahead and create a team. What that looks like then for someone that is not, if I come down here as this third user with Alex, you'll see here that they just have the option to join a team, and that create option is non-existent for them. And so this is a great start for a lot of places to lock things down so you don't have that uncontrolled sort of what can be chaotic growth of all of those backend components for things. Within here, one of the things that we also then talk about is working through creating in your rollout process a way for users to request then a team. So if your marketing department has something that comes up and they're going to create a team for a project that they have coming up or an event that they have coming up, they could send you an email. If you are at the point where you have a ticketing system, they could maybe submit a ticket. But within there, that key piece is, okay, they don't have the ability to create this. That's fine. But then what do we do with that? How do we give them the ability to go ahead and create something out of there? So it's kind of this balance that we have. So Microsoft has created this idea with groups and administration to basically be maintained by the creator, maintained by the person that went ahead and said, yeah, go ahead and create this team. And in most cases, they're structured around the idea that you don't need direct interaction from IT staff to create, manage, and maintain that group. It's made to be done kind of on the front end through this interface instead of being on the back end like we were just looking previously in all of the admin consoles. However, that doesn't necessarily work for those that do have an IT staff, that do have the ability to go ahead and take care of that and need to for compliance purposes and all of those things. So it's kind of finding that common ground there to say, okay, let's lock this down a little bit, but let's still create a way that we can use these tools and we're not creating a bunch of hurdles that people have to jump through to go ahead and create that. So within here then, we'll stay within the Teams application here a little bit to talk through a few of the other features of what it looks like to kind of administer the team side of things, and some of the things that we talk through with clients to lock things down so that there's some control over kind of what that process looks like. So if you're not familiar with the teams, so you have all of your individual chats, or maybe there's a handful of you there. And then if you click on the left-hand navigation rail there, you have your teams. And so we have teams inside of here. Those are kind of the large heading groups that are there with the icons next to them. And then underneath that is a channel. A channel is simply just a way to separate or categorize communication within teams. And so each of these channels can be anything that you want them to be. They could have planner on them. They could have additional files. We could add other applications and things up top here. We can put OneNote. You could post a part of a website or a form. So all of those channels have all of those capabilities. They're just there to help categorize that information. So internally, we often refer to them as buckets. So what bucket do you want to go ahead and put this piece of information in? The nice part about this, though, is that not only do they help for organization, but they also give us the ability to have some control over what people can see, what people can post, and what type of content ultimately ends up reaching your target audience, which is the members of the team. And so within here, one of the first things that we're able to do is you'll notice that this channel down here that I have labeled private channel has this little lock icon next to it. By default, the idea for Teams is that when you create a channel or any of the content within Teams is designed to be viewed by the entire team. So you create a channel, it's just creating that bucket or an organization to put information. And the idea is that anybody that's a member is going to go ahead and see that. There might be instances where we want to lock that down and we want to say, hey, only this group of people is able to see this. Maybe only managers are able to see this portion of things. Or if you maybe had a smaller department, maybe you had individual channels for if you were the manager yourself and each employee within the department. So you had 6 or 7 channels and it was locked down to just you and that employee. And you used it from that perspective. So there's lots of options within here, but you'll notice here, if I take a look at this channel, and as the administrator, I can come in and manage this, and we'll see all sorts of settings in here. So the first to note is that I am the owner of this channel, which means that as the administrator, I have the ability to work with this channel, add applications, and do whatever it is that I need to. And Alex here is a member of this private channel. So if I jump over to Alex's, you'll see here that he's able to see the private channel. This other account over here, who is not a member, you'll notice in their US sales section, they don't even see that channel. So that's a great way as well, just to, again, structure some content and move things around so that you can kind of control what you see. A big piece of what we talk about, and we've rolled out Teams internally, and we mentioned this process of stuff, there's a lot happening within this. So we get bombarded with notifications from email. We get bombarded from what was Skype notifications. Now chat has moved into Teams. People will post in these channels. They'll upload content. And so there's the potential there for just a lot of noise, for a lot of notifications to not necessarily have something be meaningful. And so again, another piece of this here is that this account doesn't even see that information. And so it's one way to help refine things so that information isn't relevant for this person. Just clear it out of the way. Then they don't see it, they don't get notifications about it, and it's less noise happening within there. So not only a security aspect, but also the ability to help minimize distractions and all of that. So that's one way that you can do that. The other way is that maybe you want to work on something that has one-way type communication. Maybe you have company announcements of hours that are changing or policies that are changing, or like now in the current COVID situation, maybe there's something that you want to communicate out to everybody, but doesn't necessarily need to be an email. Or the nice thing about channels and Teams is that it has this perpetual history. So in an email, for an example, if you sent something out with a piece of communication of maybe updated hours or things like that, part of that process then is people are either looking to try to file that in their mailbox somewhere to hold on to it, or they're going to try to maybe save whatever that content was, that document and attachment that you put on there, or they're going to have to try to hold on to that. Maybe they would print an extension list or something like that. They're looking to grab that content and hold on to it for some length of time. So part of what's here from an announcement section, or just Teams in general, is that it has this perpetual history. And if I go into any one of these other channels that has some other content, you can see here there's stuff back in here dating from the 9th of when we spun up this trial tenant. If we go into something that has a little bit longer, you can see that we can go ahead and scroll, and that they'll have a history here of what's going on. So things like some of those announcements are great then that someone's not looking to file that information away in their Outlook mailbox. So what we can do with this then is to say, okay, I don't want necessarily everybody to be able to go post in this announcements. This may be just for managers only, maybe it's for vice presidents, something like that. So as we're looking at managing this channel, what we can do here is set up a moderator. And so this channel with the moderator and announcements are very similar. So they have channel moderation turned on, and I've basically just selected a member of the team, or in this case, it's the 3 owners of this team that are able to post here. And I've turned off here, allow members to reply to channel messages. And so if I come into this announcement section, posted an announcement, a header, and I just put a little guy with a megaphone in there. If I come in as one of my users, you'll notice here that I can see this, and it says down on the bottom here, only channel moderators can post in this channel. And I don't have any little option in the lower left here to reply. So all I can do is consume this information. I can't interact back with it necessarily or reply things back. So great way for announcements within that fashion. The channel with a moderator is very similar, so the moderator settings are the same. In this case, I have Alex set as the moderator, and so I can post as that moderator for a new thread, and you'll notice that it has this reply option down here. If I come back over to one of our other users, you'll see here that this user who is not a moderator, I cannot reply down below and create a new thread, but I can, or sorry, I can't post down below and create a new thread, but I can reply. So you'll notice here that then this links it from Adele inside of this thread here. And so you can have a conversation back and forth. If we jumped over here as the other user, you can see here, right? So another reply. And so you'll see then that that basically has a conversation that will pop up inside of here within that to show kind of how this conversation is happening. And so it's all within that thread. And what's nice about this as a user then, if I'm done reading this, I can go ahead and collapse all those. So those are a couple options within there to go ahead and lock down who's posting, maybe how you're posting, and then likewise what it looks like to basically kind of consume that information. One other piece of this then is you'll remember that there's a Sharepoint backend to most of these things. And so if we go into the announcements section, underneath here, if I click on the picture, it pulls this up. So this picture is attached to this announcement. So if I come over into the file section, you'll notice then that this has a file in here as soon as it loads showing that attachment. So there it is, announcement from the moderator there. So what this means for us as we talk about files is that, again, there's a Sharepoint backend here. And so the default to remember within Teams is that it's designed to have everybody just be able to collaborate and just kind of work out of the box. And so there are certain situations like this one where, yes, I can go ahead and lock down who can post to the channel, but the default is that everybody can come in and they can put new content in here, they can put additional files in there, and even do things like click this and like, oh, I can go ahead and delete that, which is something that we wouldn't necessarily want. So if any of us are familiar with SharePoint, there's document libraries there, which is a document library. Think of it like a traditional folder is the easiest way to conceptualize it. And so within there, if you're talking regular permissions for things, you certainly can should and can lock down what your folder structure looks like on a file server. And so you might have things per department. You might have different folders within there for different subgroups within there or teams within your department that you can control who has access to what. So in this case, the default is that this is wide open, and that's important to note for every team that we're looking at. And so if we go ahead and actually open this in SharePoint, we can go ahead and actually look at the permissions that are part of this and then control that. So on the front end, we'll notice here that if I come into the announcement section and I go to files, so this user who is not the administrator has the ability to download. I've given them read-only rights, and you'll see here they get a little pencil icon with a red, like the red dash through it, the red mark through it, and it's read-only. You'll notice that I don't have the ability to hit new or to upload new content, and I also don't have the ability now, if I click this, to go ahead and delete. I can download a copy for myself, but I don't have the ability to delete it. So basically, just showing here that looking at these SharePoint groups and permissions on the back end are important when we're looking at what type of content is going to be in here and how we want people to be able to interact with that content. So essentially, if I come over here and I look at this documents one, and then I come here and take a look at my library settings, I'll be able to pull up the permissions here for this document library. And within here, again, the default here is that we have visitors, owners, and members. So visitors is going to be anybody external. We'll talk about that next week. Owners are all of those owners that we've been showing as the team, and then members is everybody that's a member of the team. And so the default here is that these permissions are edit for this group. And so that's why they're able to come in and see that content and interact with it and everything in there. So all I've done here is just taken this one and I've just edited their permissions to give them read permissions. So if you've ever worked with SharePoint groups on the back end or the SharePoint structure side of things, this is basically the same thing. Teams is just providing another interface or a way to interact with that data. And so we can do all sorts of things within here. These are what they would call SharePoint groups. So they're created as part of that SharePoint site when it's there. We can add any other SharePoint groups in here if we wanted. Or if you wanted to add like a security group, you could add any of your other security groups in here from a permissions perspective. The recommended option would be create SharePoint groups and then nest everything within there. So we could create a SharePoint group that has read permissions, and that could include external people, it could include internal groups or individuals. So just like you do with any type of permissions, you're going to try to avoid doing users directly here, and you're going to do them as a group membership, so that if you said, US sales read-only, and you could go ahead and put additional people in there that should have read-only access instead of having to individually define everybody. So basically here, if you're familiar with that or you research anything on the SharePoint side, that's what's driving what these people are able to see and what they're able to do here. Another piece of things from everything inside of here, if we talk about what we're able to add and what users are able to interact with, you'll notice that in this section, so these top parts here are called tabs, and I can look at the posts, which are essentially just the chat or conversation type things that are there. We have files, which is where we just were. You can do a wiki. You can add, these other parts down here, Planner, OneNote. There's all sorts of things that you can add up here. Again, the default of how Microsoft has set this up is to be collaborative, and they want people to be able to bring content in here. As an administrator, though, or the owner of the team, once you've handed that off. So if you've created it as an admin and you've handed it off, the owner has all of the ability to do any type of management that they would need in this team. As an owner of the team, you may not want them to be able to add content in here. You may not want them to be able to add tabs and things like that. So one of the things that we're able to do here, if we come into as an owner of the team and we come in to manage it, we can do a couple things. We can come into the settings part here, and we have our member permissions. And so you'll notice there's a whole bunch of things here, whether we want them to be able to add channels, if we want them to be able to add private channels. Again, as the owner, you can always do these things. This is in relation to anybody that's considered a member. And so if you look here, add and remove apps is one that we can change, and add and remove tabs is another that we can change. And so if we jump back, immediately we'll see that that plus icon now is gone. And so within there, we've basically said, hey, this is what I want for the users to see, posts, files, and wiki, and I don't want them to add anything else in here. If I decided as the administrator of or the owner of the team later on, I still have that capability as the owner. So I can come back in here and add another tab, say for something for Planner, or if I wanted to add another document library. If you've done any kind of SharePoint development in the past and you had other libraries that you wanted to bring in, you could do that. If you wanted to add specific documents from Excel or Word, yeah, you could do all of those things. I'll just add Planner here just as an example, just so that pops up and shows. So this will have me create a new plan in a second. So we'll create a new plan, save that. And if I post it here and check this box down below, you'd get a post notification that says the administrator has added the demo plan to the tenant, or to the team, excuse me. So you'll see that here, I've added that up top. If I jump back over, you'll again, here, posts, it's new. Here you go, so you can go ahead and click in and you'd see all the content that's part of this. But you'll notice that I don't have, as this user, the ability to hit the plus sign to add anything myself. It's just what you're adding as the owner. So those are a couple things within there of once the team is created, kind of how do you administer it? How do you lock some of it down? I just want to show you guys one more piece within here. So there are options in here on a channels section. Again, if we're working on how to try to reduce noise and things for people. So you'll see that as the owner here, I have a show for me and I have a show for members option. So if you wanted this to be shown for everybody and not be hidden, you could force that there. Something to note of your team, of your types for your channels, in the current iteration of where things are, there's not an option to change from what they call a standard channel or something open to everybody in the team and a private channel. So very important to note when you work through what that creation process is. As things are as of right now in May here, whatever you created as, that's how it is. You can't go ahead and change this after the fact. You can change the team, overall team status from a open team where anybody can join it to a private team where they would have to get invited and approved by the owner, but channels cannot. And then the other portion underneath the settings side of things, so there's some guest stuff in here. Logan will go ahead and talk through that portion later next week. And then there's a few other things in here about how you want to alert things that way. So that's kind of what that looks like from that portion of stuff within here. I want to show two other quick things for stuff. So again, as an administrator for things, we are always looking at what do we have to do to onboard new people? What do we have to do to bring in a new employee, things like that. And so if you've noticed, all of these have been a combination here of adding owners, adding members, working with how this is from a manual standpoint. One of the things that we can do within Office 365 is that we can create dynamic groups. And so in this case, in Azure Active Directory, I've created a dynamic group with a rule that looks for what the person's department is. And so you'll see here that I've done department contains sales. And so within that, if I click over to my members now, it has pulled everybody in this Office 365 tenant who is part of the sales department. And then I've set a owner of myself and the other person that I want to go ahead and administer this team, in this case, Adele. And so if I click over, you'll see here that there's this team sales department. And so within here now, everybody that is a part of this here now, you'll see that this team has membership settings that prevent you from adding or removing. But you'll notice that all of those people that are there are all members of this team. And so what that allows us to do as administrators is just by filling out their Active Directory information for all their users, I can go ahead and simply just put them into the system, say they're part of the sales department, they're part of the marketing department, they're part of HR, and that in turn can go ahead and drop them into groups. And then that pushes out to teams. So there's a lot of stuff there that we can do to help streamline our administrative process. The last piece of things really quickly here, and then there's some questions that we'll look at. So if you've not accessed the Teams administration side, if you log into your Office 365 portal, and if this isn't expanded, you can hit Show All, and then there's an option down here for the Teams admin portal. And you can come in here, and there's a number of things within here for a bunch of different settings. A lot of these for devices, locations, voice are all in relation to the VoIP side or the voice system if you use 365 and Teams for that. But a couple things I want to highlight here are these policies. And so there are a number of settings within here for different portions of this. So the Teams policy lets us know if you can find a private team and request to join it, or if you have to be invited by the owner, whether you can create private channels. You can set this on a global level. And so there are a number of those options within different pieces here. So you can do a meetings policy, and you can come in and go through what your meeting settings look like. And so if you want them to be able to have meetings and create meetings, how you want their audio and video to be. Content sharing, and this is a big one here for what we look at for like executives and things like that sometimes. So we may not want executives to have the ability to share their screen, or possibly HR for compliance reasons. We wouldn't want them to maybe accidentally share out their entire screen, or to share out if they're trying to share an application but they do share their entire screen and there's a sensitive email or something in the background. So we can go ahead in here and set this to disabled. And so you can change any one of these settings the way that you want and go ahead and save a policy. And so you can have, this is your default one, and you can create any additional policies that you want. And so there's meeting settings for that. There's application settings for that. And then within there, basically what you're able to do then is apply those settings in bulk to different people. So if we look at this option here for Adele, you can see that right now basically has all of the org-wide default settings. And so you would go through, if you didn't want any screen sharing at all, you could go ahead and set a meeting policy that says no screen sharing as your default one, and then set a policy that allows you to do screen sharing for a couple other people and apply that to those particular users that are supposed to get screen sharing. And so you can go ahead and do that with all these different pieces within here. So there's a ton of granularity for kind of what you want your default experience to be. Logan is letting me know. There's a couple other pieces within here. Logan, did we want to grab a couple of questions?
Yeah, we can definitely grab just a few questions within here, Jacob. So for the first one that's kind of coming in, does the ability to lock down the group creation require, require any additional licensing?
Sure. So yeah, there's a couple pieces. So the ability to create that group that we looked at before, where we created a group and then assigned them for allow group creation, does require an Azure P1 licensing. So Azure Active Directory P1 it requires a P1 license for the user that's creating that group, and then any users that are in there that have that ability. The other option that you could do is lock it down, and then, as we mentioned, anybody that has those administrative roles can do that from the back end.
Okay, great. And probably just for sake of time for this last one here, question that we've got is, are all the features shown included in the base 365 licensing?
Everything we've looked at except for the this process here for dynamic groups is part of what comes with Teams and comes with Office 365. And so if you create Office 365 or if you sign up for just the Teams portion of that offering from Microsoft, everything we looked at for the moderators and all those things are part of it. This dynamic groups also requires additional Azure licensing for the user that's creating those groups. So if you're the administrator that's creating those groups, you need that Azure P1 licensing.
Okay, great. Well, I think that's all the time that we have for questions today. So Jacob, if you wanted to pull back up the PowerPoint there, I think we've just got a few final slides before we wrap up our time here today. Great. So you might be asking yourself, hey, what now, right? And I'm trying to get to as many of the questions that I see coming through. I see there's a number being asked right now. And so I'm trying to answer as many as I can. I know we won't be able to get to any more of those, unfortunately, today. But so the first thing that I had mentioned earlier is if you do have a CCB account rep and you didn't get your question answered or didn't feel like you were able to get full clarity on that, please reach out to your CCB account rep. If you don't have an account rep, you're going to see my contact info at the end, or we might also have someone from CCB specifically reach out to you if we aren't able to actually find that we've got a specific account rep associated to you. But in that, looking at what now, and Jacob, if you would continue to go through those slides there. Great. There are three kind of things that we typically recommend. So one would be to schedule an upfront demo. If this is 30, 40 minutes of us just kind of going through at a high level how to administer and manage teams. So if you want to get a deeper dive and really review that further, we can definitely do that. And that's typically a great first step. The second thing is really around just conducting a consultation or training. And we've been doing this for a number of clients now where we're doing a half day or full day training on Microsoft Teams. And a lot of that's been end user based because we know that for a lot of you, especially on the IT side, one of the biggest challenges is how do I train my staff on this to use this properly? Because I might know how to administrate it, I might know how to set things up, but how do I make sure that my staff is actually equipped to utilize this properly? And that training is one of the biggest components and one of the things that we're seeing as a request for most of our clients here within the last month or so of what they're wanting to do. And then the last thing would be really around just engaging us for looking for additional services for deployment. So if you need to actually go ahead and deploy this, often something that we recommend is let's go in and help you set up a pilot. Let's test this out so you can make sure that this is functioning within your environment the way that you want it to, because you might have a question like, what makes sense to set up a team versus a channel? And for something like that, it really kind of depends on what are you going to be doing within that. Are you going to be doing it within the segmented portion and it falls under a department, or it falls within these like specific people within the organization, or is this just a subset of that? Those types of things will really help you determine if it makes sense to create a whole new team for this or to just create a channel, which is basically a sub team right at that point, right? So those are a few of the things that you can do from that regard. So we've already answered most of the Q&A from this side. Unfortunately, just with the sake of time, I won't be able to do any more, or Jacob. But like I said, again, we've got your questions saved here, so we will be reaching out, or we would ask you to reach out if you do have an account rep, because I'm sure we'll be able to get something scheduled relatively quickly to get that answered for you. If you've seen a number of the emails that have come out, if you are on our emailing lists or if you've seen them on LinkedIn, we are also doing a leadership podcast, and these have been absolutely phenomenal. We've had incredible attendance, and we would definitely encourage you to attend to this next one here, which is really around understanding tactical empathy with Derek Gaunt. So that's going to be taking place here this Friday, May 15th, and if you are interested in registering for that, you can see the link below. You can even just go to our website. You'll see it right up there, not up at the top of the page, but you'll see it right there where you can register for that series as well. So with that, like I mentioned, if you want to reach out directly to me, my contact information is listed right there. But with that, I want to thank all of you for taking the time again to connect with us today. Wish you all the best. Stay safe and healthy, and thank you.